Welcome, everyone. Exciting to have you here today to the DNA Behavior webinar on leading virtual teams in uncertainty. It's my pleasure to introduce this number 2 of 8 webinars that we'll be hosting for the next 8 weeks or next 7 weeks. And the purpose of this leading virtual teams in uncertainty is really to give individuals or clients and people that sort of aren't aware of us the work that we do, not only internally here at DNA Behavior, because we've done a couple of case studies, but also things that we've found in the clients that we work with. This whole concept of behavioral insights of know, engage, and grow your teams, and now we do it remotely. So that's the interesting side of what we're moving to. So we're pretty excited about this next webinar. And for those of you that aren't aware who I am, my name is Leon Morales, and I'm the Managing Director here at DNA Behavior. And my role is really to work with the relationships around the world that work with either our financial DNA program or our business DNA program. And then it's my pleasure to actually work with Nikki to deliver this webinar. It's a very important webinar that we're doing because we do know that there's a lot of people that this whole concept or notion of working remotely is very new for individuals. So we want to make sure that we sort of cover the topics over the next 7 weeks. And with that, I'm going to actually let Nikki introduce herself, and then I'll give you a little background about our company.
Great, thanks, Leon. As Leon mentioned, I'm Nikki Evans. I lead training here at DNA and delivery of some of our team programs, and am excited to be here and helping to share some of our experiences and how you can adjust now to working remotely with your team. So looking forward to the content today. I also dropped a little note in the chat box. We're gonna use that this time, so you can use the Q&A section if you would like. And you can also use chat. So during the program, I'll be asking some questions and looking for feedback, and Leon will be monitoring the chat. Leon and I will be monitoring the chat. So invite you to drop comments in there, say hello, make sure that we're tracking on what you're expecting to hear. So thanks.
All right, thank you, Nikki. And just for everybody that has been part of our webinar series, we do record this webinar. We did have a little bit of a problem from last week, but we did get that recorded, and you'll make that available to everyone for last week. This one you will get more than likely by tomorrow midday. You'll get the recording from this webinar along with the PDF presentation. And if anybody has any questions, you can certainly direct them to either Nikki or to me. And as you mentioned, we want to keep this as interactive as we can. So the Zoom webinar chat is available. So we'll monitor that as we go through this webinar. And we do have a couple poll questions that we'll ask, and that's really just to orient everybody sort of around this particular topic. We expect to go about 45 minutes, and our topics today, we've got a full program here, but we really want to talk about sort of the DNA Behavior team insights, because I think that alone gives you some insight into what we do and who we are as a team. And then we're going to really deep dive into communication. And those of you that work in organizations probably recognize that communication can be quite a derailer. If you don't understand what somebody's intention is or how they're working, and it's really hyper-focused when you're working remotely. And those of you on the call may have seen some of that happening or manifesting with your team. So that's why we really chose this number 2 topic to talk about communication. So we'll talk about communication drives relationships. We'll touch upon the one slide we talked about last week of customizing the virtual experience, doing a little deeper dive there. And then we've got 2 case studies that we wanted to talk about. One that is actual case study around a potentially disastrous meeting that could have had a terrible outcome, but fortunately, because we use behavior sort of as an underlying theme to make it more effective, there's a good outcome on that one. And then communication strengths, struggles, and learning styles. And then we'll cover case study stress and miscommunication. And then we have our next webinar, same time, a week from today at 3 o'clock on April 8th, and you will be getting the registration information for that. So with that, if no one has any questions in the chat box, we'll go ahead and get started with a poll question here. And what we'll do is we'll ask the question. It'll pop on the screen for you to actually take the poll. And the question is, has your team experienced an increase in miscommunication as a result of working remotely? So the options are yes, definitely, about usual, no, this has been our moment to shine. And that poll question should show up on your screen. If you could just take a moment and answer that. And we'll give you probably another 10 seconds. If you could all take a moment to answer that question. Okay, let's see here. Okay, it looks like, has everybody voted? Because I think there are a couple of people in the chat box that are having a little issue with that.
Yeah, Leon, the poll didn't launch for me.
Ah, interesting. It's okay. Let's end it and then relaunch here, because it does look like people.
There it is.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. A couple of people did vote, so I'm not sure what happened there, but looks like we're getting the votes in. And just take a couple more seconds here. All right, Nikki, I think we're ready to launch that. Here we go. So the votes in, showing that 22% say definitely yes, they've experienced or miscommunication. 67% for B, which is about 3/4 are about usual, and then 11% say that this has been their time to shine, and that's really great to hear. That is definitely the minority, around that 11%, but that's great that you guys are doing that. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started in our DNA behavior overview. And I wanted to show this slide here. This is a representation of our core team. We've got a number of team members around the world, but this is sort of our day-to-day operation team that we call it. And you can see here that, and I know you're not familiar with sort of all the styles, and it's one that we'll get on a future webinar, but our CEO, Hugh Massey, is an initiator, and he's a very pioneering and a risk-taking CEO. So if you look at the makeup of the team, we have a lot of reflective thinkers. We have a number of us that are initiators and one adapter, and then we have a facilitator, and then we have one person, Lisa Travis, who's our influencer. She's on our sales team. And you can see that we have a very reserved team for the core team. That doesn't represent the total team, but we do. If you came into our office on any given day, you'd probably see a lot of people working behind the computers, not necessarily being very interactive. And it's just really quite interesting because we're a very results-focused team. So that's the other side of that is we probably don't do enough communication. Our influencer, Lisa Travis, who I spend a lot of time with, she's our most extroverted on our core team, and she's great to work with. She understands what we need. And if she's bored, she's likely to give us a call or talk with us or set up a call. And she's great at sort of the extroversion in seeing that. And when we work with clients around the world, a lot of them are extroverted, and so you can see where you can have communication challenges between somebody that talks a little more than somebody that's a little more reserved. We believe that you should have a team that's made up of both results and relational people on the team, because we do see many times that the individual hires people much like themselves. So if you've got an initiator leading the business, they typically hire people that are initiators. And then you might miss out on somebody that's a little more outgoing that you need for customer care or for operations. There's just an element of it that you need for the team to really operate effectively. In our perfect world, when we run a team report, if it shows up as an adapter team, we know it has the elements to be a very effective team. And that's what we like to see. But many times it's part of the work that Nikki does in her consulting with us, is that she will be able to actually point out or illustrate where there's opportunities if you're getting ready to hire the next person, because you really want to have a pretty balanced team. And so the work that we do here at DNA Behavior, the element we're talking about today is business DNA. We also have a financial DNA program that we work with financial services firms around getting to know their clients It's sort of the core product, and we deliver it in two ways, through an API, which is basically an integration into the platform. And then we also have our retail version. So that's how we actually deliver it through our consultants, or, people come and purchase the programs with us. So what we're going to illustrate today is really around that, the remote effectiveness around communication. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Nikki, and she's going to cover communication.
Great, thanks, Leon. So I think, certainly times are a bit uncertain, or certainly more uncertain now than they have been in the recent past for many of us. And so a lot of times in that kind of uncertainty, our stress behaviors come out a little bit more. And when we are trying to communicate under stress, we end up with misunderstandings and blockages and lacks of trust. And if we can learn to communicate with each other in an intentional way, but stop to slow down that stress response in ourselves, or to try to slow somebody else's stress response down as they're listening to what we're trying to say, we can really get to better clarity and better decisions, more engagement, and just see a better result overall. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that today. So on the first webinar, we talked about how to think about these different styles that you and your teams may have when you're communicating from a natural style preference. And so we look at if you tend to think or talk more quickly, be more comfortable shouting out an idea when something comes up, or able to articulate an idea right away or think out loud. That's kind of that fast paced. The more careful are those that are more thoughtful about what they say, that are more precise and want to take a little bit more time to make sure that what they're saying is adding value and is accurate. So you'll see, this horizontal line, those profiles above the horizontal line tend to be those faster paced, more comfortable with speaking up. Those below that line tend to take more time and just be more thoughtful. It doesn't mean they take forever. It just means they tend to be more thoughtful before they speak. And then to the left of the line, those more results-oriented profiles, looking really for results and driving to logical, task-focused conclusions, versus people on that right-hand side are more relational, look at investing in people a little bit more, investing their time and just cultivating more relationship. So then when you take this grid together and you look, and we're going to get into this a little bit more in depth in a few slides and talk a little bit more, but if I know that somebody tends to be more results focused, and I notice that they are able to think quickly and speak quickly, probably what I want to give them to help them with their environment are options, bottom line summaries of things, allow them to discuss their ideas and provide input into decisions, choose from those options. For my faster paced relational folks, I want them to be able to brainstorm and provide them with broad facts and graphics, a kind of verbal picture of who and what might be involved will feel better to them. For my more careful folks who are results focused, they're going to want time to review and read up on things, to have really considered thought on things, and they'll like to have a lot of information. They want me to make my decision-making transparent to them, and the details and the things that I've looked at to consider to make a decision. They'd like for me to make those more tangible and transparent to them. Where my more relational but careful folks really are looking for a sense of security, a sense of really feeling understood, a sense of being seen, more instructions to help make sure that they're doing it correctly. They'll be very concerned with doing the right thing and doing it correctly. And so where I can provide instructions for them will feel really great for them. So we'll talk a little bit more about these styles in the upcoming slides. But certainly if you have questions about anything that I've just said, let us know in the chat box, and Leon will be monitoring that and can jump in. So I'll kind of start, I think, to make this a little bit more real, we'll talk about this potentially disastrous meeting. where 2 team members were scheduled to meet to review some steps to create a new menu item in their CRM system. They talked about it on Friday. They scheduled a meeting for Monday afternoon. So it wasn't a pop-up meeting, it was a known meeting. I'm going to call these people the trainer and the learner. So during the meeting on Monday afternoon, the trainer was totally unprepared, fumbles around, can't figure out how to get the right command in the program, several starts and stops. Okay, so this is really how you do this. And then moved on to the next step and couldn't figure it out, stumbled into the correct answer, but then couldn't recreate how to do the right thing again. So by all accounts, kind of a failed meeting, right? Wasn't able to do what needed to get done. The call ended with the trainer promising to figure it out and resend an instructional video. So a little bit of background, right? The styles of the trainer. So the trainer was a initiator who was very fast-paced and results-oriented. So in that kind of upper quadrant grid, bottom line, bullet points, decisions and options kind of communicator. The strongest traits in this person's profile were being take charge and spontaneous and creative. The learner, on the other hand, was a reflective thinker. So that's in that moves carefully but results-oriented category. In the lower left, the information category for communication. And that person's strongest traits were reserved and patient and planned and pioneering and cautious and anchored. So we'll talk more in future webinars about what constitutes a strong trait or not. But what that means, so from the style of the trainer would be very high level, happy to jump in and make decisions, very good at driving and, wanting to run the agenda and speak up in a meeting, make decisions. Will be very much a generalist and a go with your gut and be instinctive about how they approach work. Highly creative, happy to come up with new solutions and try things a different way, maybe not be consistent about the way they do things, and happy to start with a blank piece of paper and draw a new map for how things might get done each time. Where the learner profile, that reflective thinker, much more reserved, open, so that patience is kind of where that moves carefully comes from. So really thinks things through, wants to make sure that they're making a good impression and that they have thought things through and that they're accurate about what they're doing. That also comes up in that planned factor. So high planned, very accurate, high attention to detail. And then with anchored, I'll touch on is kind of, so planned and anchored are the opposite of spontaneous and creative. So planned is really great attention to detail, precision, accuracy, versus that spontaneous go with the gut, very instinctual, very apt to change and be flexible with things. And then high anchored is very experience-based, very much start with a template, do things that make sense based on something that I've seen happen in the past, very procedural, making sure that things are done in a consistent way, versus that creative, which I described before. So the potential here, given that the situation was that the trainer kind of had a failed meeting, we all tell ourselves stories, and it's really easy, particularly under stress, but we are just wired to tell stories to make sense of the world that happens around us. And so some of the stories that this learner had the potential to tell was, that trainer didn't prepare at all. What a waste of time. I'm so confused. I'm never going to be able to figure this out. I can't follow the presentation. That was of no help, and now I'll have to do this all on my own. What does the trainer even have to do anyway that she couldn't figure out how to get this training finished in a way that makes sense? Or potentially, the trainer wants me to fail at this and keep the task and not really teach me how to do it. And so, I got this half-assed idea of how to do something, and because really they don't want me to learn. Any and all of those could have been the stories that got created given this experience. And when you create those stories, potentially that leads to broken trust. It can lead to hidden resentment. It can lead to avoiding wanting to work with those people again. Certainly, it can lead to lots of frustration. It can also lead that learner to really feel disempowered. They were out of control of that situation. It seemed like they did all of the things that they were supposed to do and all of the things that would have felt comfortable to them. They talked about it on Friday. They set the meeting up for Monday afternoon, so there was plenty of time to understand what needed to get done. We thought we were really clear. You're going to show us this one thing, how to create a menu item. And it all kind of fell apart during the meeting. So you can see how with this spontaneous and creative trainer, maybe not being as prepared, thinking that it was going to all be easy and a quick thing to do, how disempowering and frustrating it can be for someone who would never have approached the task that way, who it wouldn't even occur to them to think about teaching something to somebody without having prepared it and documented it on their own ahead of time. So what did happen? So this trainer, who is highly spontaneous, totally underestimated the effort and the memory that it was going to take to do this. It's a fairly complex system that they were working in, and this was a task that hadn't been done for several months. But it had been done before, so I can figure it out. It's not going to be that hard. It'll be pretty easy. The trainer also had 2 other really high priority tasks that were requiring attention to detail, so put this task off. And then the trainer also failed to check their calendar to prepare in advance of the meeting. Kind of was I'm just going to kind of go with the flow and I can catch anything that happens on my calendar. And so failed to really think through how much prep is really going to be needed for this, because this trainer was really responding to a lot of things in the environment and really kind of felt like this should be easy for me. I've done it before. It's not that hard for me to teach somebody else to do. It'll be easy, and this is kind of a low priority thing on my radar or on that trainer's radar, and may have been a much higher priority on the learner's profile. So what actually happened? So the trainer here acknowledged that this was a total failure and that it was very confusing, asked the learner for some patience and to just disregard that meeting. The trainer also then refocused and prioritized on creating a step-by-step training video that had all the correct steps, left out all of the craziness and confusion, and delivered that as a video with a transcript following this disaster of a meeting. But it required that trainer then to jump out of that spontaneous and creative mode and get really focused on what actually are the right steps. How do I communicate those in a way that makes sense, in a way that's repeatable by somebody else, in a way that's consistent with what I want the next person to be able to do. And the learner was super patient and very open to accepting this apology and got the information that was needed to do the role because they had a conversation about it. There was a sincere apology and an explanation of, things that didn't get prepared and some of the other pressures that trainer was under. The learner was able to get a detailed step-by-step video that they really needed to do the job. And so it actually turned out okay and actually built a little bit of trust in that relationship because that trainer was able to be vulnerable and say, I totally blew it. And I know that you are probably the worst person for me to have had this kind of failure with, because I know this isn't how you work and it's not how you get information and it's not how you prefer to learn. And so recognizing that and owning the gaffe that happened there was an opportunity to build new connection with that person, because everybody understands that there's a lot of stress going on, but also the fact that it was able to be addressed quickly and addressed in a way that did feel much more comfortable to the learner and to the learner style. So I want to just stop there for a second and see if we've, on chat, can you give me have you ever seen something like this before? Do these things happen to you? Do you have questions about how that worked out or what happened there or what?
And Nikki, the other thing that we can do is there's a Q&A box on the bottom screen. If you don't want to chat, you can actually ask a question also, and that gets manned as well. We can answer the question. If it's a benefit for the larger group, we can either do it while we're hosting the webinar, or we can do it at the very end.
Okay.
Yep, I think we're good.
All right. So I'll dive a little bit more now into how do you figure out where people are on that communication grid that we talked about a little while ago. So goal setting is going to be that upper left-hand corner, fast-paced and results-oriented. The things that they'll talk about are big picture things. They will say those things with authority, and they will look questioning because they're trying to figure out how do they want to respond to this, or what is the bottom line that you're trying to get to. So if you're trying to figure out from observing people, which of these 4 quadrants might they fall in, goal setters will be looking at a big picture, saying it with authority, looking a little bit questioningly. The fast-paced but more relational folks will be in that lifestyle category. What they say will have some element of fun in it, or some element of excitement or enthusiasm. They will say it with energy. They'll be energetic about it, and they will be pretty expressive. These are lots of times, these are people that are the talk with your hands kind of people. They're also the think out loud kind of people. Before I've really formed my thought, I'm saying my thought. And that contrasts with the stability style, which is that more relational but very careful style. So what they say will sound really supportive, and they will say it with a great deal of warmth, and they will be very approachable. It'll be these people whose desks get full of people coming to share their thoughts, or to feel better, to feel appreciated. Stability styles are naturally really good at that. And then that bottom left quadrant, the more careful but results focused thinkers, will be very detailed in what they say. They will say things with precision, and they may look unexpressive when they're talking, because they're being really careful to think about the accuracy of what they're trying to say, whether or not they're contributing to the conversation by by speaking up. And so they may look like they don't have a lot of expression as they're talking. So again, these 4 styles, for the goal setters, they're able to speak candidly and directly, and they will be very direct. They will be the people that answer what, or look for the answer to the question what when you're speaking to them. For your lifestyle communicators, they're going to be open and engaging and full of enthusiasm. And again, they're going to look, their driving question is who's involved, who's this going to help, who else is going to be part of this, who am I impacting? Looks like I got a couple of chats here. Leon, are you looking at those?
I did. I answered those. And
okay.
For the group, you can see that. Hopefully you can see the answers. That's a great question around agendas, because we do know that the information types like detailed agendas, but your goal setters typically like a little bit more high level bullet points. And then your lifestyle, they may want to talk about it. They don't necessarily need a ton of information. And if you have any kind of graphics, that helps in the agenda. And then stability types just want to know really about why we're having the meeting, and more about to make them comfortable, because they're probably more focused around their family.
Right. And so their strengths are the ability to show empathy and warmth, and they really have a serving attitude, and they'll look for the how, and that's where some of those instructions come in. So as you're building an agenda, right, if I was going to hit the goal setters first, it would be what decision needs to be made. So I might even start with a statement. In today's meeting, we're going to try to decide on this. We have options A, B, and C. For the lifestyle, I'd want to also include what's the result of, who's going to be involved in making that decision, who else is coming to the meeting. So maybe part of that agenda includes an attendees list. or a little bit of who's going to be impacted by this decision. For my stability team on that agenda, I would want to make sure that I have a how are we going to come to decision on this. That doesn't necessarily have to be in the agenda, but it may be part of the rules of the meeting. Everybody's going to get a turn to speak. We're going to each have a chance to weigh in. We will have looked at this information, and when this is finished, this is what's going to, this is what comes out of this decision, and this is how you proceed once we know what this decision is. So again, that may be more verbal than actually written in the agenda, as some of that stuff may shape up as the decisions are being made. And then for your information style, they're going to want the specifics and details. These folks are going to want to know ahead of the meeting, what is the decision that we're trying to make? Why are we trying to make this decision? What information are we using? And so for a goal setter, that statement and the bullets that we're going to look at is really helpful. It's also really helpful for that information style. If you can provide where that information comes from, where did you take your bullets from? If there's a source document that you've summarized that's helping the goal setters in the lifestyle, is there some place that they can go for the reference material? And again, providing ahead of time the agenda, here's what we're going to cover, here's what we're hoping to get, and here's the information that's available for us to be making this decision. And our goal is to come out of this meeting having made a decision. That will help your information and stability folks to have thought about. So I mentioned that moving carefully is because they want to make sure that what they've said, they've thought through, that it's accurate, that they feel comfortable, that it's really what they think, and it's been considered. So those folks really appreciate some information ahead of time about what's going to happen, so that they don't feel so on the spot in the meeting. Your goal setters and lifestyles may look at an agenda, but they're probably going to be much more comfortable to wing it in the meeting and kind of go with their gut or go with the information that they're hearing from other people in the room. So again, the sooner you can provide information to your information and stability team members, the better for them, to allow them to kind of pre-think, which will allow them not to feel so on the spot when you in the meeting say, okay, so we have to decide on this, what is your input? Because they'll have had some time to think about what they want their input to be before they come into a meeting. Make sense? So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what does stress behavior then sound like when these styles are overplayed. Stress is often a cause for overplaying these styles. And so if you are working with a goal setter, you could notice that they get too forceful, too abrupt, they start interrupting because they're so driven to try to get that result, and they want to move quickly, and they don't want to take time to explain why and how. They just want the decision and they want to move on. And so you might see under stress that people who are in this goal setting style could tend to be a little too forceful, overtalk people, interrupt people, be very abrupt, and cut people off as soon as they get the information that they need, cut people off if it's going in a direction that they don't think is useful to the decision that they're looking for or to the content that they're looking for in a meeting. So for these people, as a leader, helping them to soften up, helping them to recognize, we understand you're under stress, you're causing distress for the rest of the team by being this way. When you interrupt any of these other styles, nobody likes to be interrupted. So when you do that, you're breaking trust and you're starting to break down communication and connection with the rest of your team members. For a lifestyle communicator under stress, they will tend to overshare. They may continue just to talk because it feels good to be talking, and it feels good to be the center of attention and to have the floor. And so they may go on and on past what they actually need to do to get the point across. They may also overshare information and be too uninhibited with what they're sharing with one another and kind of drop everything on the table. When they do that, that can be very overwhelming for stability and information folks, because it just feels like too much to consider, too much to think through, too much to try to sort through. And for your goal setters, it seems irrelevant, and it seems like we're not close enough to the result that we need. It seems like it's all off topic. And so you'll see frustration from your goal setters and overwhelm from your information and stability styles. So helping your lifestyle folks to edit what they say down to allow other people a chance to talk is really helpful when you're working with the lifestyle communicators. For the stability group, and those are the more careful relationship oriented, they may compromise too much or be too diplomatic in an effort to reduce disharmony on the team, in an effort to make sure that there's no conflict or that they can reduce conflict. They may be too diplomatic and not say what they're really feeling, for fear that somebody may be abrupt with them, or somebody may, dump a whole bunch of stuff on them, from the goal setting and lifestyle quadrants. And so helping them learn that their voice is important, and that it's important that the rest of the team understand how they're feeling, and that they may be the representative for people that aren't in the room about how things are feeling. Those results-oriented folks tend to really look at a business goal and can be a little bit cold in the way they approach those goals. Your stability folks are the ones that are going to be able to say, ooh, this is how this is going to feel to people if we do it this way. So they're a really great counterbalance to result. And they're able to help you see, again, how to empathize with teams, how to, a lot of teams are having to make really tough decisions right now about reducing team size or reducing hours. It's your stability folks that are going to help you understand how those messages are coming across and how you might be able to flex that message a little bit so that it doesn't sound quite as cold as it might if, say, a goal setter was in charge of that communication. And your information style, when they are under stress, they may be too serious and they may not be interactive enough. They may pull back into that reserve. They tend to be more reserved, and so they may pull back into that being more reserved and not interactive enough. So helping them understand where they may have to flex a little bit and lighten up a little bit. Yes, things are serious, but your modesty and your holding back your information and your ideas is causing the rest of the team to feel like you're disconnecting from us and we don't understand why. So now we're thinking that we've done something wrong and that you're not participating with us. And so that can be really frustrating for folks. So helping your information people see where they might be a little bit more flexible or see where they might open up a little bit more, be a little bit more interactive, then feels comfortable to them to help bring the rest of the team together. Make sense? So if I'm going to help work with goal setters, I want to present them options and opportunities. I want to get to the bottom line quickly. They're going to learn by discussing things. So as soon as I give them the options or the opportunities, I need to allow them some time to talk it through and allow them to discuss it and process that decision. For my lifestyle folks, they're going to want to openly express their views and verbalize. I'm going to want to give them broad facts. I'm going to want to give them a picture, whether that's a graphic or whether that's a verbal picture. This is what things are going to look like, and this is how things are going to look. They'll tend to be fairly intuitive about how they hear things and learn things. For my stability folks, I want to keep it relaxed and soft and feelings-based. They tend to be fairly sensory, so I want to allow them to feel how things are going to go. This is a really hard decision. If it really is a hard decision for you, those stability folks are going to want to feel like it's a hard decision for you. And so from a goal setter, when styles are communicating with each other across a diagonal, that's the hardest flex to make. And so a goal setter who's often making the decision and setting a direction, talking to somebody who is more stability, they need to get themselves a little bit under control and recognize the need to slow down, to be available, to acknowledge and validate feelings that are happening so that people in that stability group can feel better. And it's not to say that we don't have tons of stability leaders right now. Those will be the ones that tend to be more empathetic and tend to lead from that place. When they're working with goal setters are often pushing to get to, but what's the end? What's the bottom line? What's the bottom line? What's the bottom line? where that stability is really looking for how do we connect about this and how are we making sure that we're acknowledging and validating feelings of everybody. For my information style, giving them facts and details, and again, that transparency of here's all the information we have available so that you can analyze it and look at it. They like things to be tangible. They like to have time to read and process on their own before they have to present and share with others. Again, if you give people from the lifestyle category a big book of things to read before a meeting, they're going to look to see if there's any pictures in it and maybe see if there's a summary page in it. They're not going to be super excited typically about reading through a ton of details. Now, everybody has learned behavior that they can learn to do that where it's necessary, but that's not a natural style for them. Just like if I just provided a single infographic and no references and nothing else for an information style and asked them to come up with their decision, you know, their decision is going to be, I need to go research this a little bit more. So recognizing that and recognizing how you can help flex and use what these strengths are for each of your team members. So for your goal setters and lifestyles, can you provide quick fixes to them? Can you give them a quick way, a quick win? For your information and stability folks, can you provide them with procedures, or even better, have them create procedures to help you get through whatever the situation is that you're in. So I'm going to really quickly go through this stress and miscommunication. So again, these are two team members that are emailing each other where one has a stress reaction to a message. It turns out that both of them were experiencing high stress during a business issue, and one was also dealing with a pretty stressful personal situation. The pair is working on a process that typically involves just the two of them, but then Sam copies the boss on the message that includes a comment about Casey's work. And this was the first mention of this feedback to Casey. So Casey was really hurt that that comment felt like a criticism, and it was never discussed outside of this message that the boss was copied on, and it felt really unfair and disrespectful to Casey. So Sam's profile is the fast-paced lifestyle kind of communicator, fast-paced and results-oriented. Sam in particular is fairly results-oriented, but an engager and still that lifestyle type communicator. Very outgoing and fast-paced and content and creative. Casey's profile is a facilitator, so much more careful, also fairly results-oriented, but reserved and also spontaneous and creative. And so what could happen is that Casey could kind of feel like she got thrown under the bus, that Sam's being totally unprofessional, thinking now what's the boss going to think of me? How is this going to impact me going forward? If Sam thinks it can be better, maybe he can just do it himself or she can just do it herself. And again, it can lead to broken trust and hidden resentment, passive aggressive behavior, maybe some kind of retaliation. You throw me under the bus with the boss, I'm going to throw you under the bus with the boss the next time I get you. I've avoided doing that, but now it seems like that's how we're playing, so that's how I'm going to play. So to understand this a little bit better, there was a 17-hour time zone difference between the two of them. Sam was under some extreme pressure to move quickly, and several of the messages from Sam that day were very terse. And Casey was also highly stressed due to a particular difficult travel experience and was traveling over the course of this exchange. So there were several time zones involved, and there was a travel through time zones that were happening. So these emails were read sort of between travel breaks. And so lots of opportunity for misunderstanding because it's email, lots of opportunity for frustration because there's no way to pick up the phone and quickly resolve this because one's in transit and there's a huge time delay between the two. So it's the middle of the night for somebody while it's the middle of the afternoon for the other. So what actually happened is that Casey expressed concern, slowed down a little bit and took responsibility for the stress that Casey was experiencing, and also was able to kind of rationalize maybe that there was a potential overreaction to what was happening. But also was still, it didn't make it all go away, but it did slow things down a little bit, allow for a flex to look from a different point of view at what might be happening and why might that have happened, But then there was also some conversations that were had with Sam about these terse communications and how they were impacting not just Casey, but the entire team. And that it was causing those terse communications, which were atypical from Sam, was really causing a lot of stress reactions and a lot of quick, angry, defensive reactions from people on the team. So Sam acknowledged that this was stress behavior and really committed to taking more time to respond in the future to avoid these kind of miscommunications, and really, kind of took ownership of, ooh, that, I can see how that would have happened. I can see why this might have happened. I'll make sure that I slow down, particularly when I'm answering this team, and I'll make sure that my responses are have a bit more context in them. So again, the team was able to recover. There wasn't all of those negative consequences that I talked about didn't actually come to fruition, but that was because there was clear communication and there was enough trust on the team that Casey felt comfortable saying, this is unacceptable. I didn't appreciate this communication from Sam. I need some context around why this happened, and I need somebody to address it. And so those things did happen, even through this time zone challenge. The situation was able to be relayed so that and brokered so that both Casey and Sam had some quick feedback and were able to reset that relationship rather than continue to have hurt feelings and just keep those stories going and keep assuming that ill intention between them. And so with that, I'd like to turn back over to Leon.
Excellent. Thank you, Nikki. Great case studies. Those two are very relevant and probably, are case studies that occurred certainly in the last few weeks with some of the teams that we know, and with sort of the last case study that you talked about, that was sort of a crisis communication that was, that they're a part of a team, and, there was a lot of stress with many companies around the world. So you can see where that stress came from. And when they stepped back and thought about it, there's a high trust with those two individuals. So they just had to work through that. And it's sort of bringing me up to the point from the last webinar, Nikki, where you talked about, having those after action reviews. And I think that's really an important point for everybody on the call when there is stress, because if you don't address it right up front, it leads to that, the distrust. It leads to gossiping. Can you believe this person did this to me? And what you really want to do is make sure that you're being as proactive as a leader, as a team member. That's quite important, especially since everybody's now working remotely. You don't have the benefit of seeing them in person, making eye contact. Many times, Zoom is great, but it doesn't necessarily sort of convey that issue. So it's important to be able to keep the lines of communication open. So virtual team communication, that was our theme today, and really around identifying those preferred styles. And we, again, really need all four of them in the workplace. There's really five, because the adaptive type is actually a blend of all four. But when you know that about yourself, some of the preferences that you need, it can be quite revealing and important, and sort of develops your own internal strength. And then communicating with those various styles. Once you pick up clues, because people do give those clues, sort of sees it. If you're giving your boss so much detail and he's shutting down, that would probably indicate that they need bullets and probably less. And sometimes people don't really know what they need. Sometimes you can be proactive in helping them understand what their need might be. And then repeat the communications for that clarity and consistency. That's probably one of the more important things. That's that after action review that you can do. And it doesn't really take a lot of time. It really is sort of part of the trust building with all teams that should be done, whether you're using sort of tools like, or solutions like DNA behavior or any solution, just making sure that you're conveying that respect for your other team members. And with that, we're going to actually do one more poll question, because this does help us quite a bit in developing our content. And this series we call Virtual Teams is really about sort of emphasizing team case studies and things that help with making teams much more productive. So the questions that we have here, there are four of them. and we've gotten some feedback from the last one, but more case studies on virtual team effectiveness, which we did 2 today. More studies on these individual comparisons, 2 people that are sort of struggling, because we can do different case studies there. Or case studies on the leader and the team member, that's another one. And then the 4th one is more training on using the tools that you can use. So with that, we're going to actually put the poll up. So if you could answer the question, and let's see. Should show up on your screen. If you can let me know that. If it shows up on your screen, Nikki, is it available?
Yep, I see it.
Okay. So if you just take a couple seconds to answer those, it looks like we've got about 70% of the voting in. Just take maybe a couple more seconds. All right, here we go. So it looks like we have 50% like the virtual team effectiveness, and that's great. And then 38% more case studies in that leader and team effectiveness, and then training on the tools at 38%. So that gives us some great information, Nikki, for our next webinar. And it doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat box or any chats here, but I just want to make sure everybody's aware of our CEO, Hugh Massey, and Lee Ellis actually wrote a book that was launched in January. It's on leadership behavior DNA. They're running a webinar series around this concept of natural and instinctive behavior. And they both come from very different disciplines. They run a great webinar series, but if anybody's interested, it's available on Amazon. It's an excellent read, and it really does cover all the things that Nikki and I've talked about today. So unlocking that science of natural behavior in yourself and others on your team. It's a great book, so you can actually order that. And then our next webinar is set for April 8th at 3 p.m. It's the 3rd of 8, and you've given us some good information that we can build into that next webinar. You will get an invitation for that. We always like to invite anybody that's on the last webinar to the future webinar, and we'll have that in the, for the next 7 weeks. And then finally, our contact information. If anybody has information that they would like to find out more about, or anything that you can find out about, the topic here, just send an email to inquiries@dnabehavior.com. There's also live chat if you happen to go on the website, if you have any questions, and that'll get directed either to me. Our support team will make sure it gets directed to either me or Nikki, depending on what it's, whoever you want to talk to. And with that, we appreciate it. We try to be very respectful of our time. I said 45 minutes. We're a few minutes over, but I appreciate everybody's time. You will get the recording and the PDF presentation tomorrow. And with that, we look forward to you next week on our number 3 webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nikki.
Thanks, everyone.